everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of
Peg and Beg.
There It Is. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Jeff Steitzer, who you definitely know from the Halo franchise as the voice of the multiplayer announcer. I, of course, am your host, Jonathan Garrett from Burly Media. Jeff, it's been a minute. How you
Yeah,
doing?
it has. It
Great
has.
to
Yeah.
great to check in. I mean, you have been kind of the theme of our episode, really, is that you've been off on your travels, you've been at conventions, the big one obviously recently being Comic Con in the States. We've talked previously about how your sort of the arc of your career, certainly in these last few years, has skewed much closer to fans and interactions, whether it's through convention appearances, signings, or of course your what seems to now be like daily updates on Cameo, which for anyone that isn't familiar, Cameo is the website where you can pay actors, musicians, celebrities, etc., to give a some kind of shout out video message or even just to wish you a happy birthday. And Jeff, of course, you being on there. Something I've always been curious about is that when you're faced with that, what now becomes, I imagine, a daily recurring thing. You're given these, requests on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Are there any that you're given that you look at would probably be happy to do just person to person or sort of an unrecorded interaction? Have there been any where you've kind of had to go, got to draw a line there, buddy? I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
give that brand shout
Oh,
out, or like where typically does that line
every
fall?
day.
Okay.
Well, I mean, here's the thing is that I've become, incredibly aware over time that I am not at all conversant with a lot of the slang that is
Right.
traveling around the internet. So very often I get these requests, and sometimes I have to look them up because I don't know what they mean. And I tend to,
Right. Okay.
after I've read a whole list of things to say, well, I don't know what I just said, but there you go. Sometimes I don't get that far because I think, oh, there are certain things I've been asked to say I clearly know I cannot say. And some things are so disgusting and repulsive and just adolescent, and you think, no, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
you obviously have like you have a really good compass for that. Like that comes with just having, well, first of all, a vague sense of professional common sense, but equally that must be a tricky dichotomy to kind of deal with because I know that you as a person, you don't want your expression to be seen as precious or you want to be able to be free to express yourself in your own work. But then there is that sort of the factor of it's someone else asking you to do this, and that
yeah,
might not be okay.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I sometimes say when I'm interacting with people, when I get somebody who sends me a request that's just not possible, I try to reach out to them through Cameo, which is tricky because they've got to be sort of looking for a message from me
Hmm.
to know that they've been messaged. And very often I'll get to a certain point, I'll go, well, I haven't heard anything, so I've declined your request. If you want to address these issues that I raised in the comment that I sent to you and then rebook, you can do that. And sometimes people do, and sometimes they just go, nah, no, I wanted to hear you say, dirty things. And it's like, what? That's just not going to
Such
happen.
a
But
Jeff, this is such a weird problem that like I never like. I'll give you an example of an equivalent I have here in the UK. Burly Media actually we own an arcade space here in my hometown in Hemel Hempstead, and
ah,
something I obviously when I set it up I had to um put appropriate safeguards on the Xbox consoles and sort of people couldn't then
sure.
access my personal details and all of that. And something that I never considered was people you have an option with an Xbox to change your tag, your name for free once. And then they charge you. Now, of course, any purchase on those consoles prompts the PIN code that I've created for it. But what I hadn't accounted for is that the free change bypasses any security measures that I put in place, allowing people to
Oh,
change to whatever they want because it's an offline local profile. They were just renaming to the most
oh,
like abhorrent, like just some adolescent just coming in and just going, I can change your settings. And I was then it became this sort of weird quality assurance problem of like I'd go down checking controllers, doing maybe like a service check to make sure everything's running, and then having to log in to every Xbox and check the profiles to make
Oh
sure that nothing had
man.
been done. Because of course I'm not there all the time. But I suppose it's that tricky thing where with a cameo or anything that you do that's that you're a comic con, you're going to be being filmed constantly throughout the day without you even realizing, is you're
Yeah.
permanently on show, you're permanently a public facing figure, and anything that you put out, any cameo you send to an individual, you can guarantee that's being sent to friends, family, and potentially online. The
Yep.
difference obviously with art, my case is I'm not there to oversee those things. I'm having to trust that the Laser Quest, who are the guys that I partner with, that I have to trust that they're able to keep on top of that stuff, and they've got a business to run. That's not necessarily in their remit to be keeping track of that. So it meant that I've now had to install a second pin. There's like an additional layer of security just to make sure
Oh
that none of
wow.
that can happen. Which again is
Yeah.
just sort of it's a fascinating problem that I can imagine. Just circling back now to Cameo, that can't have been something that was in, or had you assumed that that was an inevitability that
No,
you'd be
not at
faced with
all.
this?
No, I had no idea. When I went into doing cameos, it's been, I can't remember if it's been 3 or 4 years. I think it's three. I don't
Mm.
remember. But no, maybe even longer. I can't remember. Anyway, when I first started doing these, people tended to be a little bit vaguer. And then I think when they saw that I would say things they sent in, a lot of people sent things, that they wanted me to say. And then eventually, I think many of them thought, wouldn't it be fun if we could get him to say, all kinds of gross, rude, terrible things? And as I say, because I don't know what certain things are, yeah, I will reach out. And then it's just a question of whether I reach the person who had made the request. And most
Well,
times
yeah, of
they
course.
come back very apologetic and they're like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. And it's like, no, it's the thing that's hard to explain is that in my own life with my close friends, I've just got a terrible trash mouth. Everything I say is appalling, but that's sort of with people that I know and who
Of
know
course,
me
and you're
and
having
are
to
gonna
like
sort of go, "Oh, it's just him trying to be funny,"
sure, and
which is
it's
mostly what it
navigating
is.
that line in the sand, isn't it? Is that knowing that you want to be personable. You're dealing with fans, people that have
Yeah,
sought you out on this platform, and there's going to be an element of you not. I imagine you don't necessarily always want to be so performative and sort of putting on a facade of who they think you are. You want to be you, especially because it's a cameo with Jeff Steitzer, not the Halo announcer. It's a
yeah,
cameo with
yeah.
you. It's fundamentally it's named for you for that reason, but then it's about figuring out that balance, which I think is such an interesting problem to navigate. And I imagine that is, or maybe not, correct me if I'm wrong, but in person, when you've got, I imagine, I'm imagining the Comic Con setup either as panels or sort of dealership tables. Is that the kind of setup? Are you at like a
Yeah,
signing table?
it's mostly tables, and then
Yeah.
occasionally there'll be a Q&A. But the Q&A, I think, because there are other people around, I don't think I've ever been asked to say anything, really. I mean,
Mm.
I get questions, and at the end, the questions tend to be the sort of thing you might expect, like, how did you get the job? How did you get involved in voiceover? And, I try to answer those questions as
Mm.
succinctly as possible, as well as steering folks to my website where I have actually addressed a lot of those issues in the blog articles that I
Yeah, I
created.
was gonna say I was gonna reference that the blog pieces you've done about your like studio setup and your audio and like the audition process and
Right.
those things, it's actually just a really well, it's interesting as a resource, but that is a nice way I think of mitigating any concerns about repeating yourself as well, is that you've got a resource now to direct people to that's there.
Yeah, I mean, I
Um,
still do, and I make it very clear to the people I meet at conventions. It's like, look, if you want to, go to my website. Here it is. This is the website. It's jeffsteitzervoiceactor.com. You can, go and read the blogs I've done. Plus, you can connect with me there. And if you have questions, because, it's not at all unusual when I go to a convention to have somebody come up and saying, I'm really interested in getting into voiceover. What do I need to do? It's like, well, we don't have time to really go through all of that right
yeah, that's a
now.
big thing to
But
unpack.
but generally, I try to make myself available to people who have that question. And give them a response because, and the tricky part about that, honestly, is that, my career path has been so ridiculous. I mean, I didn't go looking for voiceover work. People came to me. I didn't go
Right.
looking for an agent. Agents came to me. So often, I really didn't have to work very hard to get things that other people spend years trying to get and
Right.
involved with. And it was just, and that happens, that's just one of those things that, you know, uh, that can happen,
Yeah, that's
obviously.
that's
So,
challenging too when you're presented with questions like that to sort of say, well, I
yeah,
mean, as we can both acknowledge that there is a significant percentage of luck involved with doing anything that we do.
totally,
Um,
totally.
and that's very difficult to quantify for someone that is, say, passionate but early in their
Yeah.
career progression or
Well, and
their
I think,
aspiration.
in so many instances, they simply don't know what's involved. They think it's, I can do voices,
Mm,
I can do impressions of people, and you go, well, that's great, but you sort of need to figure out who you are,
mm.
because more often than not, what you're going to be doing for any kind of a read is mostly a variation on yourself, and it's going to be very personal to you. Same, I get it. Like I did, I've had a couple of requests in recent weeks to audition for some animation projects, and sort of coincidentally, both times the character was named Gramps. So it's going to be my Gramps. It's going to be my idea of a
I was gonna
Gramps,
say it's yeah.
something like that, But um, and everybody's just going to be different. The hardest thing to sort of grasp is that there is no right way. The
Mm.
right way is the way to get you the work. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
there's no,
but you
oh my
have no
God,
control over it. You have
yeah,
no control over it.
there is no pre-described path. There are things that you can certainly box tick, whether it's, booking yourself into a workshop, getting the piece of paper, the undergraduate,
Absolutely.
whatever
Getting
the
equipment. You got to
yeah,
have
get
that
getting your own setup and
and
all and
knowing how to
investing in
use it.
yourself. Right.
Yep.
There's definitely some certain things you can box tick, but I feel like the notion of what that success looks like and achieving a certain level in one's career, I don't think there's a pre-described path for that. And certainly you and I can validate that for our own pathways, where we've ended up. I just don't think
Yeah.
that but that can be quite a tough pill to swallow, I think, for some people. It's kind of demystifying that little bit when they're coming to you very green, very enthusiastic, and wanting to know those things. When the reality often is, well, right place, right time, investing in yourself, and a heap of luck
Yeah.
as the things that
Well, and
get
also,
through.
I think a lot of people get this notion, like, I think it might be interesting or fun or kind of cool, to get to do this, and then think
Mm,
there's some quick way to the top. And it's like,
right. Yeah, yeah.
no, that doesn't really exist. The thing I like to point out was the very first voiceover job I did was in 1976. It was in the
Right.
last century. And then, I did get to work a good bit over the years doing that. It wasn't the principal thing I was trying to accomplish. I was more interested in theater, but I loved doing it and it was always fun. But, we're talking about 50 years of experience at this juncture. So, you're not going to have that overnight,
No.
obviously. And so
Which
what
is
you need to do is you need to love what you do. You need to make that obvious when you work. Nobody wants to go into a studio with a person who's a jerk,
yeah,
and
or
just,
resents the work they're doing. My God. I mean, can you
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I
And you
mean,
don't you don't want to sort of crush someone's spirit either, especially if they are someone looking to leverage your expertise and wanting to know more. If you then come across as that sort of jaded,
no, it's
long
not a
since,
question of being. It isn't a question of being jaded, but I used to. I used to get asked to come into acting classes at various schools and stuff and talk about, how do you get into the business? And I
Mhm.
would talk about, well, it's virtually impossible, and you shouldn't really even plan to. And
No, but that's
there,
not Jay. That's realistic. That's
there's only three
that's
or four people a year that ever get to work. And I was going on and on and on. And by the end, having purged myself, I felt great. And then I would suddenly notice the class was all looking suicidal. And I think, well, maybe I went a
like
little
why
too
why are
far.
we getting so many dropouts in this class? What's going on?
Exactly.
But
What?
that's not that's just realism. What I'm meaning is like like I've always said about my own teaching. if I suddenly started resenting working with young
Oh,
people, it's time to
yeah.
go. I'm not going to be that career teacher that just does it because, well, I have the qualification and I get the paycheck. And that's what I
Yeah.
mean is that you don't want to be in a position where you are jaded to the thing that you once loved. And that is,
No, I mean, if it gets to the point where I can't love the work I'm doing, I stop doing the work. I mean, that was true of appearing on stage or
you talked about that
directing
with
on
theater,
stage.
didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I don't see a point in doing it now because I no longer have much fun, for a variety
Well,
of reasons.
as you often do, my dear friend Jeff, you have helped me beautifully with my segue here because on the subject of something no longer being fun,
Yeah,
uh, quite publicly, deliberately so, a few months ago now, I believe,
been a while.
you drew a very, very clear line in the sand in relation to your presence on social media. Specifically, I think this was motivated by your TikTok account and some interactions that happened there. To be clear, for context, a very loud minority, I think, that was the catalyst for this decision. Because whenever I have browsed the comments on any of your videos, it's normally a bunch of people saying, oh please, would you say this? You're a fucking legend. Like it's typically, as you would want, as you would hope, very wholesome and very supportive. But you made it very, very clear that after a sort of a sustained run of some unnecessary negative comments about yourself, that you decided very, very clearly to step away from that. And obviously, recently with your Comic Con appearance, you were promoting that. It was actually like you saw actually there was a lot of like he's back. Like there was a lot of sort of like really great reception. It wasn't like an eye roll. It wasn't like oh, but you said there was none of that going on. It was actually quite the opposite. It was very positive. And I was curious, what was it purely, do you think, an opportunity to shout out an experience that you had that you were getting involved with? Or had your mindset about this changed a
Oh,
little
it
bit?
changed. It changed. I mean, basically, what this already goes back to was that after the results of the last election, which did not go the way I would have hoped it would here in
Right.
America, I
Hmm.
was so upset. I was really angry. I was really saddened. I was really discouraged. And I thought part of the problem was I'd been spending so much time, on YouTube, watching videos.
Hmm.
I'd done a lot of work for different campaigns. I'd done a lot of letter writing. I'd made lots of contributions. I'd done all these kinds of things. And then, I was very much a sore loser because I thought the stakes were incredibly high.
Hmm.
And I thought, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be a part of, I don't want to get into discussions because that was starting to happen. People
Okay.
were actually showing up on the chat side of things and arguing about the candidates. And it's kind of like, I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do
Right.
with my presence online. So I took a break and I thought it was going to be permanent. And then at a certain point, I realized, who are you really punishing? Not the
Right.
people who won the election, not the people who, succeeded in their attempts to take over all the different branches of our government. They're not paying any attention to you
Hmm.
after all. But, those people who are fans and have loved the work that I do over the years, it's like I've just cut them off. And I thought that doesn't seem right to me. And so,
Right.
yes, I did come back on. But I also mentioned I was trying to decide what form this would take. And a number of people, of course, wanted me to say things, which I will do. A lot of people wanted to know about my life and career, much of which I thought I'd talked about in
Hmm.
previous videos. I mean, there may be other things that I'll think of that I haven't discussed that I could, and maybe I'll talk about that. And then one thing really interested me, and that was some people said, oh, I listened to you read anything. And I
Mm.
thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, what form would that take? And obviously, there are certain books I don't think I can read because they're not in the public domain. And I don't know that I don't know how much you can read online before people go, wait a minute, there's this thing called copyright. And you
Yeah.
are
Slow your roll,
basically,
pal. You got a
yeah,
cool voice,
exactly.
but that is not allowed.
Exactly. Exactly. And then I was visiting my daughter and son-in-law, and he said, what you ought to do is you ought to narrate fan fiction. And I thought, oh,
Oh,
now
that's funny.
that is kind of interesting
But playing it sort
because,
of like playing it like straight and like that's
oh,
fun.
no, but I mean, a lot of the fan fiction is straight. I mean,
Mm.
when I was doing the TV series The Fugitive, we got canceled. And, bit of a sidebar here. I happened to be at a convention earlier this year in Lexington where I got to meet Tim Daly, who was the fugitive, and
Oh, no way.
I had never met him while we're doing the series because I was on the other side with the guy who was chasing him, and of course
Right.
we never catch him. I mean, I'd seen him. I'd walked by him once. He was sitting and
Well,
talking
yeah, that's
to
sort of the show,
Veronica
isn't
Hamill.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like I walked up and said, "Excuse me, Tim, my name is Jeff Steitzer." And we did a series together. And he looked at me and he said, "What series?" And I said, "The Fugitive." I was with Michael T. And he went, "Oh," and then we had a very nice chat
Oh,
where he
lovely.
explained why he thought it might not have continued. But after the show was canceled, there were a lot of fans who were like continuing to write the story
Mm.
that had been introduced in the series. And I thought, okay, something like
Oh,
that,
there's something
you
there.
know,
Yeah. I
yeah,
was
I mean, that
sustained
could be
actually
kind of
by
interesting.
I was sustained during the pandemic when we were all in lockdown. Sir Patrick Stewart's Shakespearean
Oh,
soliloquies that he was putting
his
out on Twitter.
sonnets that he
His
did.
the
Yes, I
sonnets, yeah, the
remember.
sonnets and the
Yeah,
soliloquies were the
yeah.
because he had like I think he did all of them. There was like 160 odd
There are
sonnets,
quite a
isn't there?
few. Yes, there are quite
Yeah.
a few sonnets.
All
Yeah.
about the same two things. We had to teach it in English as well in my school, but um, just loved it. It was so like his daily sonnet readings were like just they sustained
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I think he threw in a little bit of his Lear in there as well. He did Lear, did some Macbeth, which was great. But
Yeah.
that's a fun way to leverage your social media in the way that's unique. I think that's a really
Yeah.
nice approach.
So I'm just trying to sort of decide exactly, what I'm going to do, but I'm going to get back on and because I said I would and, figure out like what day that's going to be. So it's the other issue. I mentioned this before we began filming was that it had become like a whole career because I thought I'm going to do one every day. And it was just, I mean, suddenly I didn't have any time for anything else because it's like it,
Well, Jeff, to
did
be
take
fair,
a lot of
between
time.
that, yeah, between that and your cameos, plus the fact you were doing an audiobook at the time as well,
Mm,
that's sort of nonsense. And then you're throwing in your personal appearances, convention trips, etc. on top of that, not to mention any other
yeah.
work that might come your way.
Well, it's,
That's starting to get a
you
bit
know,
silly.
as you know, I'm old enough to, legitimately say that I'm retired, except that I'm not.
No,
But it's
you're
a
not.
question of, all right, so how semi-retired do I want
Okay,
to be?
okay.
And because there are a lot of things, there are a lot of other things that are of interest to me that I'm spending my time with right now. But foremost among those things that I really enjoy doing is traveling around
Yeah.
and visiting, all the friends I've made all over the country, as well as my family all over the country. I was recently in Chicago to join my son. He had to go see an eye specialist about some issues he had. And so we got to spend a couple of days together while that
Oh,
was going
lovely.
on. And then I went to Buffalo, where my daughter lives with her husband, got to spend time
I
with
was
them. It was
gonna say
great.
it's a quite you are quite in that sense quite spread out, aren't you, in terms of like having to make trips to visit and how often would that
Yeah.
happen in a typical year? Is that sort of like is that a once a year deal? Do you try and get there for the holidays? Is that kind of like
No, I mean, a lot of it, as far as my son lives here in Seattle, so I see him pretty regularly.
oh nice.
But when he's working, obviously it gets to a weekend and it's like, do you want to get together and watch a movie? Because that's what we do. And he'll sort of go, yeah, I can't really. I've got a lot of things to get ready
Mm.
for the week. And because he's a teacher's assistant. And so it's like, okay, that's cool. I mean, I got all the free time. He doesn't. So I've got to sort of accommodate that. But my daughter, living as far away as she does, I don't see nearly as often as I would like. We talk on a regular basis, but I like being face to face. I like
Yeah,
being on
totally.
her turf. And in fact, it's lovely because after having gotten to spend a very packed weekend with her and her husband, Diego, and their delightful dog, Coco, the Wonder Dog, um, they are going to be coming to Seattle for Thanksgiving. So I
Oh
will get
nice.
to spend them. Yeah, and we'll celebrate. probably do an early Christmas celebration as well, and that'll be nice
Oh,
because
fab.
she spends. I think she'll be spending Christmas. They often do with his folks or his mom and his siblings in Atlanta. So
It's
yeah.
great that you've got such a, despite your geography and despite obviously like your son's work schedule, you've still got a really close knit bond, and that's something I've certainly, as the older I've gotten, I've be kind of cherish more and more, particularly with my folks who, they're still together. They live locally to me. I've always lived in Hertfordshire and Hemel, and it's a very quick and easy drop in. And shout out to them, by the way. Shout out to you, mum and dad, who have listened to every single episode of Tag and Bag. And we've actually never talked about this, Jeff. Is that my folks absolutely adore you and this podcast, and
Oh, well,
they
hello to both of them.
that's super jolly, man. Well, look, so I mean, you've had a fairly substantial in terms of travel. You've had a fairly substantial year thus far.
It's been a busy year. I've done more conventions this year than I've ever done by a lot.
Yeah, and
And
actually, I remember you saying at the end of last year that that was potentially on the cards, and it's obviously as that's clearly worked out like that. Is there any sort of other major trips planned before end of year, or is it too early to say yet, or
I don't
anything
know.
on the cards?
I don't know. I mean, there might be something coming up here in Seattle. I'm not sure. I
Okay,
believe there's something happening in February of next year that I can't talk about yet because
sure,
it hasn't been announced by my agency. Um, it was interesting because the most recent thing I did was I went to the San Diego Comic-Con, which is the biggest
that's right.
Comic-Con in the country. And I was originally brought down there by this company called Upper Deck Trading Cards, because a year or two ago I was approached by my agents who said, "Would you be willing to sign some trading cards?" This card company, had been doing sports figures, and then they decided, "Hey, wait a minute. There are an awful lot of people who seem, to like these
Yeah,
gaming
yeah, yeah.
people." So they said, "Would you be willing to do that?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, of course." And did. And, it was nicely remunerative, although I thought I was doing pretty well with what I was being paid per card. And it was actually very hard work, very hard work. I had to sign my name. After a while,
You did.
I forget what
Well,
my
again,
name
just
is
the
or
silly
how to
life aspect
spell
that
it.
this. Yeah.
The worst part was it was on a little tiny card. It was so small.
Okay.
And it's like,
It's,
then on a couple of them, I had to sign like Killtacular. And you wouldn't think that was a long word, but when you're trying to squeeze
no,
it
that's got
onto
some syllables in there.
yeah, it's a little bit tricky. So that was a little bit fun. But then I thought, okay, they paid me some money for that. And then a while later, I was talking with my friend Jen Taylor, and she sent me a screenshot of what it was going for on eBay, and it was like $600. It was like,
Jesus,
what? Yeah, it's
that's
like,
nuts, isn't it? It's a
I
whole
mean,
other world that
it's
sort
a
of like that
collecting,
collectors that yeah the
collecting.
collecting and the
Yeah,
value proposition of those items, and especially like because
absolutely.
we had a really cool retro games market swing through Hertfordshire, and popped down, picked up some GameCube games. I'm a huge fan of that era, and I was looking around the room at some of the like Spectrums, Amigas. You had some Commodore
Oh,
64s going on, and my God, there was one of them. There was a sealed Japanese Nintendo Entertainment System, so the NES, the first platform,
wow.
650 quid, which is about what, $700-800, I think, roughly
At
speaking.
least, yeah, yeah.
And by the way, that was
Crazy.
without any games. That was just the hardware boxed, and
Yeah.
you kind of went, "Whoa, it's just another
No,
world,
I
isn't
mean,
it? It's nuts."
I follow. There's a guy named Halo Collector who I met at one of these conventions, and occasionally he'll pop up on my
I
Facebook
think I
feed.
saw that on your Instagram. Yeah.
And it's like you look at the stuff he's got. It's just this is what I got today, or this is what I got. Now
Mm.
I'm going to get this next week, and it's amazing to me. And I was talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine, and I said, well, think about it. Because when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Walt Disney. I think I may have said that on this program before, but I mean, anything. I wanted the comic books. I wanted
Hmm.
there was a Sunday comic strip that they did every weekend where they would basically do the story of their latest movie to come out in a cartoon form. Had to have that. Watched all the television programs, the Mickey Mouse Club and Disneyland, which became the Wonderful World of Color, and visited. I was living an hour away from Disneyland at
Oh,
that point
amazing.
in California, and this is the 1950s, right after it opened. I was just obsessed with it. And so, I understood a little something about
Mm,
collecting, not to the same extent, but I understand because the things that people get are basically just another way of accessing the memories that you have of that thing that
yeah,
did something special for you, maybe
that
made
meant
you
something.
feel, yeah, it meant something. And so
It's a sort of it's a physicalized form of expression, isn't it? It's you're expressing the
it
thing
is.
that you truly have developed a passion for. I mean, I have that with my Last of Us tattoo. I have that with my figurines. I have sort of adorning the wall. I have my Halo ones up here somewhere. But it's just another way of sort of showing passion. It's passion for something in a caramelized physical form. Um,
Absolutely.
but then again, the side of it where it's like the people that have like the the mint condition, the sealed copies, the sort of like the value prescribed to something that is like unopened is just it's crazy
Well, in my
how
day,
yeah.
yeah, when I was a kid, people used to like, they used to collect stamps or they used to collect coins. I
Mm,
mean, that was kind of the extent of people's collections back in the 1950s and 60s. And then over time, people started to collect the racing cars that you could put together and paint, and you'd go to
hmm
people's houses and there'd be all kinds of things, or planes, or, all kinds of stuff. And this whole pop culture collectible, universe, because it's huge,
hmm
is just jaw-dropping to me. It's kind of amazing. So
it's
after I did the
yeah.
upper deck trading card things, I didn't know that I was going to have a table there. They were going to try and get one, but literally the day before I flew down to San Diego, I didn't know that I'd be doing anything other than the 90 minutes of signing those trading cards. Well, it
Right.
turned out they were able to get me a table. That was a good thing. And I was able to sign cards for the rest of the first day, which was a Thursday, and then all day Friday. And then I had Saturday to run around because I was raised in San Diego. So I actually went
Ah,
by the
okay.
house I was raised in,
Oh,
from
cool.
the time I can remember till the time we left to go to Iowa. And it turned out there was a woman who was getting something out of her car. And I said, I got to go talk to her. And I walked across the street, and my cousin, who was with me, and her husband joined me. And I said, I have to tell you, my name is Jeff Steitzer. And I grew up in this house. In fact, I think we were the first people in this house. My dad added the addition. He put in the pool that was in the backyard, and
Mm.
she had turned out was a realtor. And so she explained how they got the house in April of this year. They just moved in and were looking at all the work they
This is
wanted to
such a
do on it.
trip. This is so unlikely.
It was amazing. And so basically she said, "Do you want to come in and take a look around?" It's like, "Do I?"
Oh
You
man.
betcha. So I was able to go in and look at the pool and look at all the changes, and the TV room now had access to a hallway, which it did when I was growing up, and the dining area by the kitchen was now the laundry room and all this kind of stuff. It was great. It was an amazing thing. And then I went to Balboa Park, where there were more memories because I'd taken art lessons out there as a kid, and there'd been a pup theater that I remember vividly. And I've worked a couple of times at the Old Globe Theater, so I got to walk past that. It was great. It was a great,
That's
great
great. And
time.
it's all literally contained within one 4 day Comic Con week
Yeah,
long weekend.
yeah, yeah. It was it
That's
was an amazing time.
just
Yeah.
so cool. And no doubt, very unlikely to be the last. It's going to be something we see you popping up again and again.
I hope
Um,
so. I certainly hope so. I love doing it, I have to say. I mean, honestly, it's just so incredible to meet people. I mean, after a while, I just don't quite know what to say because, people are incredibly, they're so profusive about the nice things they say. And,
mhm.
it's like, I just, I don't know how many ways to say thank you, but
No, of
that's kind of the
course,
way I
yeah.
feel.
and if you were British, you'd have a real problem with compliments anyway. So that's a genetic thing that we have. That's an issue
Yep.
for us. So
Yep.
I hear you, pal.
But it's
Well,
fun. And
yeah,
yes, I hope there will be more. I certainly hope there will. Well,
absolutely.
I know there will, but
Yeah.
you know.
It's gonna be fun, and that's gonna be something we can check in on again, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to this latest episode of Tag and Bag, featuring myself, your host Jonathan Garrett, and my co-host Jeff Steitzer. You can find us on all of the things, all of the socials at Burly Bird Media. That's Facebook, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, Podbean, and Spotify, as well as our Discord community. Our Discord is a really jolly place. Please do come and check that out. It's a really fun place. We put up new episodes of our various shows every single Monday, and you can also find Jeff Steitzer at jeffsteitzervoiceactor.com, as well as on Cameo as well, where he is just literally a factory of jolly shout outs.
Well,
So
I don't know about a factory, but there are other people who do a lot more than I do. In fact, one
really?
of them is oh yeah, there's an actor named James Marsters who played Spike the vampire. And
Oh yes.
I gave him one of his first jobs. He was in Chicago, and I was doing a play there by a British playwright that I'm very fond of, Peter Barnes.
Nice,
The
okay.
play was called Red Noses, and it was the US premiere at the Goodman Theater.
And one of his
And
first jobs.
one of his first jobs, I had seen him in the play before playing Ferdinand in The Tempest for Bob Folds, the artistic director. And then I came in and did Red Noses, and he stayed in the
And
cast
he's
for
just
that.
cranking out the
He's
cameos.
done well. Oh, yeah. Did a lot of cameos. Yeah.
Well, folks,
Which is great.
please jump in, check it out, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.